What's up, Rockstar?
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm well. Looking forward to seeing you next week.
I know it's coming up quickly. It's going to be great.
It is. And I've hired a videographer for Saturday morning
Wonderful.
for 3 hours. And Social Imprint's giving me a list of questions to be able to engage so I can make lots of content to use all year long.
That's really smart. Letty and Lewis are actually going to be there
Okay.
from
Oh, they
Social.
are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is super cool. So
Oh, great.
you'll get to meet them.
Let's write that down here. All right. Thank you. And thank you for doing this. When I made a note in the podcast calendar, it said for February, this is actually being recorded early. Next month, in the month of March, we have a success habit every month
Hmm.
inside Cambium, which I'm also going to use for the Kathleen Metcalf. You can't really say I'm wearing my Elite Builders
Let's
t-shirt.
go. I love it.
Is really for us. It's for Kathleen Metcalf. It's for my work with EXP and looking into the new year. Is think big is the
Yeah.
success habit for the month of March.
Okay.
So I'm recording this early because the day of our Thrive Together masterclass, you're not available on that day of the week at that time that we have this regular class. So I'm like, whatever. I'll invite somebody else to that, but I still wanted to do this with you
Awesome.
because you are the perfect guest to talk about thinking big. So this doesn't have to be the whole half hour. This can just be 10 or 15 minutes if we want.
I have
But I'm
whatever
gonna,
I have the time. So however it goes, it goes.
great. So however this unfolds, but I really wanted to be able to now have your perspective on the success habit of thinking big in the real estate industry and how this makes an impact on everyone who's involved.
Yeah, it's good. Okay. Let me open this up real quick. All right. Less shadows. Let's do it.
All right. So thinking big. Think big is our success habit for the month of March. So Erin Novello, thank you for being here with me
Yeah,
from
my
Elite
pleasure.
Builders. Right. We're in here together with EXP. And think big is an element I know I've heard before in our industry. I know that this is a part of what lots of coaches and sales coaches may talk about, but bringing that from a concept into a value and then into a series of habits and practices is where I want us to go. So, from the
Awesome.
beginning,
Yeah.
what do you think the impact of Think Big is to an agent's business? How can that make a difference?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I agree with you that kind of terminology gets like overused. It's kind of like the term mindset.
Yeah.
And then, or like, thriving. It's like it's like this interesting generic term. And the question is, like, what does that mean? I think a lot of our industry, because some of the loudest voices have kind of encouraged that as being the definition, is
Right.
that consuming big is not the same as thinking big.
Oh, I love that.
They're two different things. And I think that oftentimes we equate those, right? We think like thinking big is like thinking big in the material world.
Hmm.
And my experience and then the kind of relationship with that kind of comfort and complacency or convenience,
Yes.
kind of playing not to lose versus playing to win.
Yes.
And that is really kind of the vein that my experiences is where the real definition of kind of thinking big can be found
Okay.
is uh is really kind of asking yourself, because I know for myself, the most expensive thing I can own is a closed mind.
Yes.
And really thinking big is about like expanding kind of belief limits. It's about expanding your perception of what you're capable of.
Yes.
It's about expanding kind of into instead of being on Mount good enough for me, where I'm like blessed to be blessed,
Yes.
moving to kind of another mountain, which is where you're blessed to be a blessing to others.
Yes.
So it's just that to me, as we kind of have this conversation would be the context with which we have it. Like that to me is the definition of thinking big. And I know that when you begin to do that as a leader, whether you're leading your team, agents, an organization, what the leader does in moderation, they give permission for everybody else to do in excess.
Well, that's nice.
So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not if I'm playing not to lose, then everybody around me is going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not pushing boundaries and kind of expanding, if I'm not mm, growing, then it's not a realistic expectation to imagine that those around me will grow.
Right? Because that reverberation happens. So let's talk macro into more micro and talk about the real estate industry as a whole and some of the potentially, I'm an optimist, right? So some of the
Mm.
incredible opportunity and possibilities there are for the industry forthcoming.
Yeah.
So how think big also is important and has important impact and consequences to the real estate industry.
I lost you for a second. One moment, I lost you for a second. So the last, I know they'll edit it. So the last thing I heard is like macro and thinking big.
Macro and think big to the real estate industry and
Got it.
all of the possibilities there are now for the changes that we've been going through over the last year.
Mhm.
Okay, so now as an optimist, I see all kinds of terrific possibilities, and think big is a part of that.
Yeah, I think that I also think that context is a part of it as well.
Okay.
So kind of understanding that part of that context is we've had 2 years of record low transaction volume. Like it hasn't been this low for the last 15 years. So we
Okay.
went from 6 million to like 3.9 million. When I say that out loud to people, oftentimes they'll be like, well, you're being negative. And I'm like, well, don't confuse like reality with negativity. Just because it's not something that you want to hear doesn't mean it's negative. I'm all for being optimistic, but you can never lose track of the hard facts of the situation.
Yes, love that.
So that's part of the context. The second context is I believe that we're living through a time where there's a massive shift in control happening, where
Okay.
control
Tell
is
us
being
more.
taken away from real estate agents.
Mm.
And by that, what I mean is that if you do not have control over revenue streams, then you are actually incredibly vulnerable.
Okay.
And, we kind of have decisions that we need to make, whether it's a brand new agent, a seasoned agent. A brand new agent has a few paths they can take. One is they can join a team. And
Okay.
the analogy I like to use is if you've ever seen a mama bird feed a baby bird, what they do is they go out, they find the worm, they chew it up, and then they spit it in the baby bird's mouth. The challenge with that is that there's two expenses that flows to the agent team split. The second is for the referral fee for the lead.
Right.
So they end up working for very little money. The second option is they can do it on their own and also be dependent on those third party providers, which you still, whoever controls the lead controls how much it costs.
Yes.
And, with these TCPA rule changes, we were given a grace period of 12 months
Yes.
to actually kind of wean yourself off those lead sources if you are dependent on them. Because what it'll mean with a high degree of probability is that now that they have to, they used to be able to get opt-in and they could sell that lead to an endless amount of people
Mm-hmm.
and they could spread the cost of that lead over those, let's say numbers of agents. Well, provided that it still goes through in its current form,
Okay.
12, 11 months from now, they won't be able to spread the cost of that lead out. And opt-in only counts to it only gets on one person. So they gotta only give that lead to one person, and they have to tell the consumer which agent that is and who's going to reach out to them. So the cost of leads is going to explode with its very high degree of probability. So as such, we have where the opportunity lies because wherever there's kind of disruption in a market, there's opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Question just where is it?
Right.
And where I see the opportunity is in knowing not only the specialized knowledge of how to, let's say, go out and obtain business independent of referral fees.
Right. To actually fish on your own.
Yeah, because the problem is having played in the playground with some of those third party kind of providers in 2022, what I noticed is because we earned a couple $100,000 in commissions just from one of those sources. We paid them $50,000 in referral fees one year. Increasingly, they revealed how they really perceive agents, which is that they perceive you as employees
Ah,
and they start to treat you like an employee. So you got to hop on calls with them. They follow up with your leads. Then they start to really, really give you static about not using their ancillary services.
and their
And
script and their follow-up system.
yeah, and essentially what they're communicating is, without really saying it, is like, hey, if you don't give us all these ancillary services, we're going to stop giving you leads. So that's that path and where it leads to. And that didn't go away. It just went to sleep for a little bit. It's still around, but when the marketplace shrinks, so they're still there. Some of these third-party providers got backing from like Google, like $100 million before, the
Right,
marketplace
right. Wow.
changed. So, so as agents, where the opportunity is the specialized knowledge of what
Hmm.
to say and how to say it, and also understanding where to hunt, what lead sources are independent of referral fees. Because I believe that with these changes, what we've seen happen is on the listing side, on average, as it's kind of shaken out with the changes and how we kind of the mechanism with which commissions go. It used to go from, broker to broker. Now it goes from seller to brokers, right?
Yes.
That what we're actually seeing happening in practice, that listing agents are making more money. So there's an opportunity, right?
Yes.
Right there, where the commission on that side has actually gone up. And the other opportunity is in knowing again, where to fish those lead sources, whether they be niches, things like
Mhm.
probate, like life events, things like
Yes.
offer programs. Those are working very well. That's not the traditional four horsemen that you hear from, the gurus in our space that just basically recycle every year for sale by owners, past clients, just listed, just
Expires.
sold, expires, and FISBOs. Like they've been recycling that for like 40, 50 years. Like nobody's really talking about like different stuff.
Right.
So I think that's where the opportunity is. And now with technology, whether it be media or software like EXP, for somebody who really understands the space and is entrepreneurial, you can really build an enormous ecosystem that has multiple flows of revenue.
And what is the impact on the professionalism that you would see in our industry from having these shifts happen and listing agents, right? And being a listing agent is a complex responsibility to really do it well.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that it requires, on a whole, traditionally and historically, the vast majority of agents are very buyer heavy. Probably 70% of their business is buy side deals. And what the marketplace has revealed to us is that through rule changes and everything, the marketplace pays less for that. And the reason is because truthfully, it's not as skilled of an activity. Now, I know when I say that, people are going to get upset. It doesn't make it any less true. So, as such, this pivot that requires us to be more sophisticated, requires us to be more knowledgeable, not
Yes.
just understand retail, but understand like wholesale, understand creative finance, sub two, to be able to add more value, right?
Right.
To be able to understand these kind of higher forms of leverage and software. And I think it used to be 10, 15, even 20 years ago, you could just a soft skill. Now, not understand technology or have somebody on your team that does, you're going to have a problem over time because you're not able to deliver the speed and efficiency that we're all accustomed to. Like me and you can know where our Chipotle burrito is when I push a button and they tell me it's in the kitchen, then they tell me it's in the car, then they tell me it's 5 minutes away, and then they tell me it's at my house.
Yes.
But the traditional agent who's not using technology can't tell you how much money they made last month. They can't tell you where closing is. They can't, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
I believe that this pivot, I think that there's a lot of people, and I say this lovingly, I don't mean it like in any other way. I don't mean it egotistically or anything like that. I just think that a lot of agents don't really have the bandwidth kind of make that pivot. So they'll have to make a choice. They'll either have to be on somebody's team
Mhm.
or in somebody's organization, let's say, which is a new version of the team. I would
Right.
propose it's a much more efficient and effective and profitable version of the team that does understand it, right? So that way they can help to kind of equip them with what they need in order to thrive in this new kind of environment and ecosystem. Because when we go back to like those third party vendors, like we have to understand that we have very sharp elbowed, very intelligent, with endless amount of money competitors pushing into our space.
Mhm.
And like if you think that you're gonna get them because like, you put pumpkins out in July, like nah, dude, it requires a higher level of sophistication because they're coming for the lunch. Like they want 30, 40% of all, 50% of all the money. Like that's what they want.
Yes. And I had a client tell me once that they're charging us agents money to put us out of business, that they want that kind of control and they are going to, right, be able to squeeze. So if you're not doing this work of getting your own business and learning the skill and what to say and how to say it, then you are becoming dependent and you are more like an employee, even though you're an independent contractor.
And even though you're boasting and sitting on panels and saying my business, my business, my business, the underlying reality is that you actually are employee of the one that's providing you the leads. And the underlying reality is it's wild to me, Kathleen, that our need for significance is so high that we will take emotional payment rather than actual be profitable.
We say
We
that one more time. That's good.
so our need for significance is so high that we will take emotional payment rather than actually being profitable. So, we'll be put on a panel and be like, oh my God, they do all these units and all this other stuff. But yeah, you gross 1 million, but you're keeping $200,000 a year.
Yeah.
And you recognize that your cost of sale is like exploding and that like, it's difficult to be profitable. And I was in a super high level mastermind with the top teams at EXP, and I was leading kind of a small pod, like a group. And these agents, if you were to take the top like 200 agents at EXP, they would represent the sixth largest brokerage firm in the country. That's how many units they do.
Right.
These are people that are highly productive. And
Yes.
what was fascinating to me is almost all of them uniformly were in production that are leading the team.
So they're walking the talk.
Well, walking the talk. They have to be in production to make the money that they want.
Oh, I see.
And what came to the surface is even the best, the world class, the best of the best, 20 to 30% profit margins. They're telling me, hey, there's this no man's land where you're at like 20, 50 agents where you're like, what am I doing? Why am I even doing this? Where what came to the surface is the only reason to do that is to get enormous and get to ancillary services. It's the only that whole thing is actually not that profitable.
To break the profit margin.
Yeah, but we're all playing this game. We're all standing like 250 units, 500 units, 1,000, you know what I mean? Like it's like what are we doing here? So yeah, I think that it's super helpful to be like I know it's very difficult to not be emotional about information because whenever I hear something new, it usually creates friction because it's in contrast and pushing up
Right.
against what I currently believe.
Yes.
I've just learned to become ruthlessly attached to the truth and to make decisions in accordance with what, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I think that now presents this really interesting opportunity for agents. Again, we have this kind of grace period. And I think for those that do pivot, they understand media, they understand like platforms like EXP, they
Mm-hmm.
understand not just retail, but they understand wholesale and all this other stuff so they can add value. Whoever adds more value wins. Those individuals will build kingdoms. They will build enormous ecosystems with multiple streams and multiple flows of income. Those who don't will either find themselves out of the business or working for like a Redfin, working for a team.
Because operationally, right? So let's sort of talk about this parallel universe of most agents are not equipped. It has been so common in the residential real estate industry that sales would fix everything, that you just sold what you could, that you spent what you thought you had to, right? And there was very little tracking or paying attention even to profit. There was very little delegation for administrative or operational tasks. And agents somehow got the message that they were supposed to try to do everything and be good at it, and then not be good at it and feel bad about it, and then owe the IRS $250,000.
Yeah, I've seen that too. So yeah, what I kind of, as you're talking, I was like writing something down so I don't forget. The question to be asking yourself is, am I building something or am I just selling? I think most agents, because we haven't been told anything different, is we operate our business like a cash grab.
Oh,
We just
yes.
try to rip out as much cash as we can to basically fund lifestyle. And as a result, we end up, because we don't have that type of thinking of
Right.
systems, standard operating procedures, CRMs, staff to help you process transactions.
Yes.
Because we don't have that thinking, it invariably leads to a very specific and defined destination, which on a whole, unfortunately, most agents who are successful and fit in the category of, let's say, like, because I think 0.001% of agents gross more than $1 million a year, and only 4% of businesses in the country ever gross more than $1 million a year. So it's
Mm-hmm.
infinitesimally small. And I know we see them and it seems like they're all over the place and people put them on panels or whatever, but like it's actually very small. So let's
It's
say an
quite
agent
small.
between 250 and 500, which is like very successful. In any office around the country, they would be in the top 10, like easy.
Right.
So for that agent, if they don't learn those other skill sets, unfortunately, like most high income earning people, whether it's physicians or doctors and attorneys, they again, there's always exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, they don't have much to show for it when they're done.
Well, this is like sports figures,
Yeah.
right? Who go bankrupt or lottery winners, which is probably even faster. But the idea being that we talk about workflow, systems, and finances, that this three-legged stool is how you build something sustainably. And as the lead agent, even if you're the only agent, right? If you're an agent, but then having whatever that support is to be able to think this big and to manage workflow, teamwork, finances so that you are running a business, even if you like to keep it small, even if you want to sell, right, 25
Well,
homes.
and that yeah, and that's an interesting point because like I think what we think is that staying small is safe, when in fact it's actually really risky.
Because you're so dependent.
Being enormous is safe. So like think about this, like most people, and this is an interesting kind of thought about leverage. So let's say you build a team
Yes.
and you have 10 agents. Let's say 3 of them actually do business.
Mm-hmm.
You are putting your risk on 3 people. And if one of them goes away, you
Yes.
have a pretty big problem on your hands because you're dependent on them kind of, being the technicians. Well, for me now, because of a pivot, if we reframe the way we think team, I have 400 agents, let's say, on the team. I'm spreading that risk out over a lot of people.
Yes. As opposed to 10 or 30 or
And really, out of the 10, it's always 2 or 3.
yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So this is why, like, again, I think what it requires is a rethink. And this is thinking big,
Yes.
not consuming big. Okay. Those are different things. Thinking big is like, hey, we've been doing it this way for a while. Here's what the numbers tell us consistently over time, but we're stubbornly keep doing the same thing.
Yes.
And we're not open to something different. And I know my life changed dramatically. Like if you, when I just opened my mind, right? So like, I love to ask agents when I'm in kind of, whether it's in the digital form in a group of them or, in the physical world, like the event that we have coming up. It's like, hey, how do you think we see things? And they'll say, well, they'll look at me like, this is a trick question. I'm like, it's not a trick question. Like, how do you think we see things? And they're like, well, your eyes. And I'm like, okay, it's a normal, natural response. I would expect you to say that. What if I told you that's not actually how you see things? And they look at me like puzzled, like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, Your mind is what actually sees things. It uses your eyes as a mechanism to gather data, like to gather,
Yes, that's the
right?
science.
So what's actually true is that if my mind is blind to the possibility, my eyes will be blind to the opportunity.
Yes.
So there will literally be something right in front of me, a solution right in front of me to this problem, but I just won't see it. And that's thinking big. Thinking big is like saying like, hey, is there a better way to do this? Because a lazy mind's answer is just to work harder. And we fall into that like hustle culture, Goggins,
Yes,
like, you know what I mean?
decades, probably
And
centuries.
yeah, and this idea, but and what I'm aware of is, yeah, that was true in an environment where labor was the only form of leverage. But now we have levers that are much more powerful, which is media and software. So like a more sophisticated mind says, hey, how can I do more with less? How can I get the same outcomes or the same amount of revenue, but just do it in a much more leveraged way? So to give you an example, the most amount of units I ever did in my career was 202.
Okay,
I had two full-time assistants and I had two buyer's agents. The buyer's agents only did like 30 deals. So the other was me. 80% of that business was listing sold.
right.
Required a lot of hours to do that.
Yeah.
Well, last year, the organization did 1,600 transactions for over $700 million worth of real estate. So what you make up for, I can make up for with leverage what I lack in ability. So that's thinking big. That's saying like, oh, how instead of just working harder, how could I do more with less? What vehicles, what skills, what platforms, what
Right. What organization?
opportunities,
Hmm.
what organization, what's available to me that would accomplish that goal? And then usually what the challenge is there is once I find it is having the courage to do something about it. Because the issue is money has an addictive quality. So because of it, we get addicted to the way that we receive it.
Yes.
So agents been making money a certain way. So you present them something different. And they're like, I don't want to do that. Because that's scary to me. I'm afraid that if I do that, then, I won't have food and drink for the journey. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yes, because it's the vine, right? We hold on to the vine and then you got to be able to swing to the next vine, which means at some point you let go of the other vine.
Yeah. And I think ultimately what that comes down to is just like not believing in the promise. So what I mean by that is, whether somebody has faith or not, I think, there's some interesting stories in the Bible that we can learn from.
Yes.
And there's one in which like the 5,000. And what's interesting is they bring them five loaves and two fish. But the five is significant because it represents a promise of provision.
Mm,
And the two is significant because it represents a witness. So
nice.
before all those people are fed, he looks up, gives thanks. But it's like, what is he giving thanks for? Well, I'm giving thanks for the promise of provision and that 5,000 people are going to witness it.
Yes,
So I
nice.
think at its core is we just don't believe that promise.
Mm.
Because if we believe the promise, it would make it easier to let go of that vine, if that makes sense.
Yes, this is blind faith, right? This is
Well, this is faith.
is faith, right? It's not something you can see until you're in, right? Until you're on the
Well,
other.
yeah, and until like again, like either I believe in the promise or I don't. And I think the truth is like what we
Thinking Big with Aaron Novello.
sorry, internet's being weird. So yeah, either I believe in that promise or I don't. And I think that that's what makes that kind of gravitating towards new things really challenging.
Yes,
But I do believe that because we're living in a time where things are changing so quickly
yes,
and technology is advancing so fast, and it's happening in our industry, like for sure, that
yes.
the two skills that are the most valuable, The first is your willingness, your ability, not only a willingness, but your ability to learn things quickly.
Hmm.
A second, the second one is a willingness to change your mind. Now, that second one is so hard.
So critical.
It's so hard for two reasons. One is because we're by nature prideful and we're also rebellious. So I'll give you an example. I had a coaching client. He does very well, $1 million a year in GCI. He gets the idea like, hey, I'm going to have a physical location. I'm going to build this big team and I'm going to join this company that has a 15% split that doesn't cap and it's going to be great. I share with him some ideas that were contrary to what his belief was. And he's like, I'm going to do it anyway. I said, great, go ahead and do it. Well, a year later, he comes back to me and he's internally freaking out because the people aren't producing in the way that he thought he was, and his expenses have gone up dramatically.
Hmm.
So what I said to him on a call, Kathleen, was the following. I said, hey, bro, you have three options at your disposal as I see it. The first is you radically expand the team because you need way more agents. If they're only going to do an average of like 5 deals, you need way more of them.
Right. You would weigh more to pay the bills.
Second, you cut them all and focus on production and produce your way out of it. The third is you admit that you were wrong with regards to the platform that you're with. And that third one, I need you to understand, it's the hardest. It might take you a year. Now, most people think there's it's noble to go down with the ship. That's dumb.
Because the ship's going.
It's going, right? But they think it's noble. But what you know what's really underneath that? They don't want to admit that they were wrong.
Yes, because there's more than one ship too.
Yeah. And there's more. It's like, well, why I'm going down with that ship, but there's this other ship that's like leaner and cleaner and more efficient and will get you there faster. But it's like, well, I didn't think of that myself, so I don't want to do it. It's like, well, okay. I mean, I guess so. So for that
Remember,
reason,
that's
I
prideful
think
again, right?
it's prideful. That's all it is.
Mhm.
So I think that's why it's so important for kind of the agents out there to find a guide, whether it's you or me or somebody
Right.
who
Or
can,
us.
yeah, or us who can equip them, yeah, our ecosystem, with Lars and Jose and all these people
Yes.
that can equip them with a clear picture of the landscape and provide guidance with to navigate the sea that has
Yes.
waves and in the deep end and it's rainy and windy and all that.
Yes, and what to bring along with us. And I love also the one of the elements of this transition is that the collaboration, which is a big part of how I run my life and have and run my business, is that there's so much competition in the real estate industry. I think one of the other wonderful consequences of this in our platform at EXP and in Elite Builders is the collaboration.
Yeah, and I think at its core though is interest alignment. So what
Yes,
I mean by that is that Warren Buffett said you have to be very careful how you incentivize people because it shapes behavior.
yes,
So models matter. And in previous models that are hierarchical, meaning like there's a king or a queen at the top, and then
yes,
they have like regional management, right, which is concentrated,
yes,
and then they have like office owners, and then they have agents. In that model, the lion's share of the money goes to a very small group of people. And as such, they can speak to culture, they can speak to collaboration, but the vast majority of it is just marketing.
yes,
Like kumbaya, we hold hands, like this is great. Okay. Well, in another model in which money is distributed to the agents, they do become owners. They end up
yes,
owning equity. They share in the revenue of the company if they bring people. Now our interests are aligned. So now I'm incentivized to collaborate. I think to imagine, obviously from a spiritual perspective, like, yeah, collaboration, love thy neighbor as thyself. Yeah, that's great. I'm also been on planet Earth long enough to know that humans' natural tendency is not to do that. And it's definitely not to do it in the business world because we're selfish by nature. So to have a structure, right?
yes,
A model that actually incentivizes that behavior has a much higher degree of probability of causing that to actually happen. And for that reason, that's why EXP, like where the pros go to grow sort of thing, that's their catch line. That's why it becomes a super highway for leaders. Because now, I can be properly compensated for leading, for adding value and for collaborating. Now I have every incentive to share with Kathleen or to share with any of our partners all of my best stuff because I want you to be more successful than me. I want you to sell a lot of real estate because I'm a shareholder. And when we sell
Yes,
real estate, I get my dividend. And I want you to sell real estate because I participate in the rev share. So now we can collaborate as a company instead of people in glass houses that you never get to see or talk to by invitation only.
right,
Now I can sit down with Leo Perea, the CEO of EXP, and there's a recognition that I'm an owner and he's an owner. These are just two owners talking to each other.
right.
And that's super cool.
And both leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you, Erin. Thank you for thinking big in your real life and for being that inspiration and that guide and for helping everyone who gets to listen to this in sales, as agents, as team leaders, as brokers, as operations leaders, that think big is a success formula and a great habit to bring into their lives and their business.
For sure. And I'm super appreciative to be invited on the platform, to have an opportunity to share. I'm appreciative of your kind of trust and collaboration and contribution to the organization because I know you help tons of people. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing you in about a week
Yes,
as we get together and collaborate at a super high level. And I look forward to an opportunity to share in the future.
me too. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. That was fun.
Nice. Thank you very much.
Any thoughts on that? Any takeaways? Did that go the way you thought it would?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I had other questions to ask you about, your history, but you already volunteered some of that, so it was great. And I wanted to also be able to have the operations leaders who would listen to it also recognize that they play a part in it because they also have to help these agents think big and then know what they need to do to support them. Because some of the agents may not ever get good at the operational end of taking care of the business.
No, and truthfully, they shouldn't. It's not really their role.
No.
And I know that that's like that creates friction, but like it doesn't make it any less true. It's not really their job. Their job is to be in the presence of prospects, but we need to get agents to be thinking more like business people and not just agents.
Yes.
Because what I shared, and you know this, it's true.
Yes.
That
I mean,
their control's being taken away. And they think like you can lose so slowly, it feels like you're winning. That's what's happening.
tide's going out.
Yeah. So, and again, for those who see it and who make pivots and put things in place, they will do very well, if not better than what they were doing before. And they'll maintain profitability. Others, it'll put them in a situation where and this is how I'm going to lead off the kind of the summit. Uh, It'll put them in a situation where they're dependent on basically an employee of either a team or one of these third-party providers.
And what is the profitability that you see or can see or think can help people build? Because 30% profit is common with most of my clients.
Oh, well, those are the best operators, by the way. 20 to 30% best.
And
And
so in
and the only way,
EXP,
and if they're in production, it might be more. So if somebody tells me like, oh, I'm doing 40, 50%, they have a team, I'm like, yeah, you're selling real estate, like 100%. And the challenge is what it really is revealing is a rudimentary understanding of leverage. That's really what's happening. Because they're in their mind, the only way they think of leverage is I need this team. And they just do it because they think that's what they're supposed to do. That's
yes.
like the next evolution of leverage, where when I kept bumping up against that, but I really didn't want to do it. So I stuck to just selling real estate, being highly profitable, taking money and buying things that pay me money. But then I skipped that and did the team thing just in a different form. In a form that where I didn't have any of the expenses, in a form that is way more scalable, in a form where I have an operational partner who runs the whole thing. So the equivalent of me, let's say, making $15,000 to $20,000 a month in rev share is the equivalent of doing $1 million a year in GCI at a 20% profit margin. That's crazy. That's wild because you know how much goes behind doing that much revenue. Like people,
Yes.
staff, hiring, firing, systems, software, like all
To say
this,
nothing of the listing appointments and the negotiations and the, all the things that go into
all
doing
the
all those
heartaches, the
deals.
deals falling apart, all the rigmarole. So I think that that needs to really be rethought, and I'm not hearing anybody talk about it. Like nobody's really talking about it. And when I was in that mastermind, what was wild to me is these people are like the best of the best, and they're all doing this team thing, and none of them, it's not really that profitable.
No, it's a lot of
Now,
money.
there was one in the room who understood what it actually is. So, and he was one, he ended up speaking, but he came to EXP maybe like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. He has 22 lines of business. So he owns a title company, mortgage company, inspection company, like all that, roofing company, like all that. And somebody asked him, they said, of your 22 lines of business, what's the least profitable? He's like, oh, that's easy. It's the real estate. Least profit with the most friction. And they said, what's your most profitable? He said, lending money. They did 60 million in revenue and they have 3 employees
Yeah,
because there's not a lot of friction in that. So, but he said, I understand that the team that does, let's say 200 units, their entry into the transaction
yeah,
gets me to all the ancillary.
yeah. So it's a
So what
gateway.
agents aren't realizing, and by the way, brokerages are macro to the micro, which are agents, because we've taught agents to be mini brokerages. That's what we did. That was
Yeah.
like Gary Keller's brilliant idea. Like, let's teach them how to be brokers like us,
So they can have 15%
so they
profit.
can have the same problems we have.
Right, which is what I
So
did with my coaching business. And I was like, oh, I built a brokerage. Of course.
exactly.
Because you said to
So
me, of course you did, because that's what you knew.
that's exactly right. So that's what they're doing, but they're not making the connection. They're not realizing it for what it actually is, which is like, hey, if you're going to do that, the reason you do it is not to make the money off the agents. It's not worth it. The reason you do it is because you own a title company or a mortgage company or whatever, and you get all the ancillary. So if that's how the traditional brokerage model operated,
Yeah.
which is really what it is, that's the like
Yeah.
untold dirty little secret of brokerage, which is that they don't make money, and the way they make money is an ancillary. Well, that means that what the problems are for brokers are the same problems for teams because they're micro versions of the teams.
Yes.
So then if that's what they're doing as an answer, there's two solutions. So what's the solution for brokerage? Well, they have to get rid of all of the expenses, cloud-based. One solution. Second solution is instead of doing it in the physical world, I do it in the digital world. So I have now 400 plus agents that if I had did that in the physical world, it would cost $50,000 a month to have two offices and staff and like all this stuff, and now it costs nothing. The revenue from that is virtually like 90% profit, but that becomes a backstop to everything that I'm doing. Now I've taken something that is a loss mitigation business, which
Right.
is brokerage and teams, and turned it into a revenue producing thing. That's the answer.
And do you have any tracking on the individual profitability of the agents inside the 400?
No, but I just anecdotally, because I talk to them all the time, for the ones that I like are listing heavy volume, it's probably 40 to 50%.
That's good.
That's what I was. I was like 51%. So we've been told that, yeah, do the team thing. It's how you make a bunch of money and like blah, blah, blah. But in practice, that's actually not what's true. What's in practice, whether you like them or not, what Mike said about being like a lean, mean listing machine and be profitable, like that's actually the most profitable thing to do. It's
Well,
just that
because
we
once
don't,
again, it's the top line. They do the same thing in the coaching industry, paying attention to the top line. But
right.
the bottom line keeps getting smaller. When I was scaling my business, my profit was the lowest it had ever been.
Yeah. And the only answer to that is you got to get enormous,
Yeah.
or you have something else that's a backstop. So if you're making $10,000, $15,000 a month of recurring revenue, yeah, I don't care if that's 10% profit margin. Who cares? It's fine. Right. But most agents, team, they don't have that at all.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, it's interesting to me that like I'm sitting in this room, there's some of the best agents on the planet doing crazy units, They're all selling real estate. Like nobody, it's like, I want to be like, hey guys, you realize this is a collective hallucination. Is everybody, can we stop like ego stroking for a second and be like, yo, what are we doing? And what I tried to explain to them, you know what I did, which is really funny, because I was like, yo, a better way to do this is rev share, the team thing. I said, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm in the brokerage business. I have an operational partner. I said, Leo, can you raise your hand, please? I said, you see that really talented, smart guy over there?
Yeah.
He runs it. He's the operational partner, handling all the problems, all the issues, making sure people get paid on time. I don't do any of that.
Right.
So in my opinion, the evolution needs to be stop doing the team thing or stop focusing on it so much and trying to make it work because you're going against like you're just going against too many headwinds to make that make sense. Because the brokers you know what the brokers did? They did you a huge favor. They tried to do it. And it didn't work.
No.
And we're thinking, oh, well, I'm better. No, you're not.
No.
Let's operate under the assumption that you're not smarter than them. Let's do that.
Right. It's an illusion.
So and we just went right down the same rabbit. We just they fell into a cliff and we're like, oh, that seems like a good idea. And we went right into the cliff with them.
Lemmings, right off the cliff.
And instead of doing that, pick your head up, be like, yo, it's fine to have a couple agents on your team to help you process deals. Stay focused on doing what you're doing, live within your means, operate at 40, 50% profit margins. Instead of optimizing for status and comfort and convenience and lifestyle, optimize for time freedom and location freedom. Invest in things that pay you money.
Yeah.
Right. Understand that if you do that for 10 or 15 years, you will be financially free and independent. You'll probably have $10,000, $12,000 a month in monthly recurring revenue, which is enough to pay for those things for anybody. And if it's not, you're probably living a wild lifestyle. And then do this attraction thing. And that attraction thing will dwarf the income that you get from investments, just so you know. That's really, to me, that's the answer.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear. The challenge is just, it's like the guy in the cave who he realizes that they're chained to the floor. And then he gets up and he's around all these people and they have this whole civilization and they think that they're the shadows on the wall. There's fire behind them.
Yes.
But then he turns around, he realizes there's a fire and he looks at the chains. He's like, oh, these are open. So he gets out and he leaves the cave and he sees sunlight for the first time and water and trees and the sky. And he's like, oh my gosh, I got to go back and tell everybody. I'm so excited. He goes back and tells everybody. And how do you think they responded? They told him to never come back. So that's the challenge. And 7 times said is once heard. I got to tell people things 7 times before they hear me, 7 times before they believe me, 7 more times until they consider it, 7 more times until they actually do it, 7 more times to encourage them to keep doing it. It's just and the goal is to just lead by example. So I lay out all this logic, right? It's okay, all that makes sense to me. And I'm like, great, let's look at the money now. Look at it. Here's it in play. So it's not just theory. I don't just sit in a room and pontificate.
Right.
Here's as it's happening real time in the real world.
Yeah. Here's a reality.
Mm-hmm. All right. Awesome. Well, I've enjoyed this. I look forward to seeing you. Are you bringing your husband or no?
No, he's going to stay home.
All right. I know he was considering coming, right?
I come in on Wednesday, which is my birthday.
Yay. Oh, that's right. I've already, the team let me know, which is awesome.
And then I'm going to leave on Saturday. My flight's at 2. But I'm setting up, Carla reached out to me today so that we can do an interview and I'll interview others. And then I have the videographer on Saturday. So I'm going to make the most of it.
Good. Do it. There's lots of people in the room. Anybody you need for me to talk to, if you want to talk to them and I can pull them over to you, just let me know.
Thank you very much. And may I have this recording?
Yeah, of course. Just email Gabrielle. She'll get it to you.
I will. Thank you, Aaron.
See you.
Bye.
Look forward to seeing you. Safe travels.
You too. Thank you.